Welcome to the Denver Gazette Sports Podcast. I am your host, Chris Schmaedeke, and today we are brought to you by Applewood Plumbing, Heating, and Electric. They have been serving Denver residents for 50 years, and they are the proud sponsor of the Colorado Avalanche and this podcast. And on today's edition, we are reacting to the Denver Broncos 42-17 loss to the Detroit Lions. So I am joined by Chris Tomasson. Chris, how are you today?
Hey, thanks for having me. Doing great. Appreciate it.
No problem. All right, so let's react to this game a little bit. Vance Joseph talked earlier in the week about team speed of the Lions, and it was pretty obvious that the Broncos were a little bit of a step slower than the Lions most of the game.
Yeah, the Lions were running all over the place in the first half, 21-0 at halftime. I mean, the game was pretty much over then. Jared Goff had thrown 3 touchdown passes, and it looked quite lopsided early. And then you get them on the fast track of the indoor stadium and that sort of thing. And the Broncos defense basically regressed. I mean, it didn't look like the same defense that had been, aided their turnaround in the previous 2 months.
Well, and one thing I noticed too was that Jared Goff had plenty of time. They really didn't get any pressure on him throughout the game.
No, this is a team that had 15 sacks in 3 previous games and were 6 by defensive backs, and they were coming from all over the place. But no, they didn't get much pressure. They had 2 sacks, but not much pressure at all. Jared Goff had plenty of time to pick them apart, and that's exactly what he did.
And, I don't think the defense was bad. I mean, they regressed, like you said, but also they did force a couple punts early in the game, and then the Broncos offense kind of sputtered out and didn't do anything with those opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, they got off to a hot start on their first play of the game. Russell Wilson hits Jerry Jeudy for 40 yards, and then you have the fumble. But then they stiffened up on defense, and that didn't lead to Detroit scoring. So you're thinking, okay, hey, they got another shot. But after that, they really generated virtually no offense in the first half, and then the Lions just got rolling.
What do you think of that game plan offense a little bit? Because I would think that this was a game where they'd want to run the ball more, keep the ball out of that, away from that high-powered Lions team. But, I mean, they started with it was like 5-6 passes in a row to start the game, wasn't it?
Yeah, they didn't establish the run early, which has been what they've done with some success in a number of their victories, coming in and winning 6 out of 7 games. But Javonte Williams really struggled. He couldn't get it going. I mean, he had 12 carries for 27 yards, and until he had a late 8-yard burst, his average was way worse than that. He had 2 receptions for -7 yards. And in fact, I asked Sean Payton on the conference call earlier today if we're going to see more work from Samaje Perine. I mean, it's strange to me that Perine has looked pretty darn good when he's run the ball. He's averaging 4.9 yards per carry this season, but he's gotten such limited opportunities, especially since he had that top-notch Cleveland game a few weeks ago.
Well, and yeah, McLaughlin was in there more early on than Perine was, wasn't he?
Yeah, McLaughlin technically started the game. And
that's right.
That actually was a nifty play there, because every time we've talked about this before, when McLaughlin's in the game, it's a telegraph run to him. Well, no, instead they threw 40 yards to Jerry Jeudy. So obviously that was the plan, to use McLaughlin as a decoy. But as the game went on, I mean, the Broncos had 25 yards rushing in the first half. They ended up getting some garbage rushing yards at the end of the game when they knew it was over, and they, just handed the ball off to run the clock out.
So the big story, unfortunately, is the little bit of the spat between Russell Wilson and Sean Payton. I guess Sean Payton did most of the talking there, not Russ. But I want to talk about before that, because they seemed to score 3 times and they didn't get a touchdown on any of those calls. What do you think is, I guess let's start with, why didn't Sean Payton challenge those first 2? Because it looked like at least one of them got in.
Well, he said today that the McLaughlin one, he looked at it pretty closely and was considering challenging it. But, it goes back to officials, challenging spots is tough. So his thinking in that situation, okay, we're at the 1-inch line or whatever, it's third down, we got 2 plays to punch it in. We're down 3 touchdowns, hoping to cut it to 2. Timeouts are precious, so perhaps he didn't want to waste one that was overturned because they had a tough row to hoe in coming back and still had 2 downs. The second one, Javonte Williams stacked up. It didn't sound like he thought that was a good chance he scored on. And then the third one, Michael Burton did, of course, score, but that was nullified by the offensive offsides on a guard. I can't, Quinn Meinertz. I can't remember the last time I saw offsides on offense on a guard. And then that's when the yelling on the sideline started. Peyton said he was mad at the call, but why is the penalty? Why is he yelling at Russell Wilson? He didn't have anything to do with the call. I mean, basically, I think Peyton was just pissed off at the whole turn of events in that they had a touchdown. They had a chance to score a touchdown to cut it to 2 touchdowns. And so he's, yelling at Russell Wilson. Wilson's a quarterback. I think it was just general frustration from Peyton.
So Russell Wilson was kind of in the wrong place at the wrong time. Peyton was going to take out
he
something
was there,
on someone
yeah.
there. Yeah. All right. And then, again, I mean, they were going to be down. What was that going to make it? 28-14 at that point?
Yeah, it has gotten a lot of play because Peyton and Wilson, are they feuding, et cetera. And by the way, Peyton said today that he has a great relationship with Russ. Of course, that's what he said. But in reality, even if they get the touchdown 28-14, the third quarter's almost over. The way the game is going, I mean, the Lions just waltzed down the field and scored immediately after that. So really, even if Burton's touchdown holds up, I don't think they come back.
Yeah, they hadn't stopped them all game, so it probably wasn't going to happen. And also, as Sean Payton said so nicely after the game, it's none of our business what he talks about with Russell Wilson, right? Yeah. So, all right. So let's talk about big picture now. This was one of the games that, you and I have talked about that they probably could lose because it was an NFC game. But, the way things went this weekend, now the Broncos have to win out and get some help.
Yeah, if they win out, I think their chances are reasonable of making the playoffs. The schedule is helping them now. They close with New England, the Chargers, and the Raiders. Although I will say the Raiders in the last game, they're going to be playing for their coach, Antonio Pierce, wanting him to stick around. So they're going to certainly, even if they've been eliminated from the playoffs at that point, have something to play for. But a lot of teams play each other. I mean, Cincinnati plays Pittsburgh this weekend, and Houston and Indianapolis, 2 teams they're chasing, they play each other at the end of the game. I mean, yeah, they need some help, but if they win out, I don't think it's a colossal hill to climb.
So let's talk about this week a little bit because the Patriots come in here, they're 3-11, right? Is that right? Yeah.
Correct.
Worst season in a long time for that team. But the Broncos are going to get a fight from these guys. These guys gave Kansas. I mean, that game was in New England, but still, KC didn't do much in that game. So, I mean, this is no cakewalk for Denver.
Yeah, you're still going against Bill Belichick, deemed by many the greatest coach in NFL history. And so he's obviously embarrassed by the way this season has gone 3-11. He's doing everything he can to scratch and claw out wins to end the season. So, yeah, I think it's definitely going to be a competitive game. I mean, there's conflicting reports about what might happen with Belichick after this season, but he seems to be the type of guy that, wants to coach again. He doesn't want to end his career in this manner. So it might mean going to another team. And hey, if he can put together a masterful game on national TV, I mean, that certainly can't hurt in his quest to get one of these other NFL jobs next season, if that's what transpires.
So not to get into too much math here at the end, but Cincinnati plays Pittsburgh this weekend, and then Buffalo is at the Chargers. I mean, the Chargers have pretty much quit. We'll just say I don't like saying that, but that's true. But Indy's at Atlanta, And then what's Houston doing? Oh, Houston's got Cleveland. Okay, so I mean, there's some tough games in there for the teams that the Broncos are trying to catch.
Yeah, and let me throw this out. Everybody after their recent play is suddenly anointing Buffalo as the possible Super Bowl champions.
Yeah,
But let's look at this. If the Broncos win out and the Bills the Bills win their next two games, but then lose at Miami in the season finale, which will be a tough game, the Broncos will hold the tiebreaker
right.
over the Bills. So that has to be taken into consideration. So, yeah, this thing has to play out. I mean, like I just said, the Broncos have a soft schedule, but still, it's tough in the NFL to win three games in a row. And it's interesting that the Broncos, who players often talk about, one game at a time, are now saying, well, we got to win three in a row. And even Peyton said that today. So they need to focus on the Patriots and definitely do need to be thinking one game at a time this week.
This is kind of a big picture question, but say they don't make the playoffs, they go 9-8. Is this season still a little bit of a success for this team after starting 1-5?
Yes, I agree. If they go 9-8, or okay, let's say they win their last three and they go 10-7 and miss out on the playoffs. Yeah. It's definitely a success. It's like, hey, 10-7, it's a 5-game improvement. Hey, tiebreakers didn't go their way, blah blah blah. If they go 9-8, people might look at it as which of the last three games did they lose? Because if they lose to one of these losing teams and that prevents them from making the playoffs, that's going to cast a negative there. But I think of the big picture, 9-8, which is actually what I picked them to go at the start of the season. I think I picked them 9-8 and to not make the playoffs. Yeah, that's still a 4-game improvement, and digging your way out of a 1-5 hole when the season looked lost, I think you would call 9-8 a successful season.
I really think the game that should worry Bronco fans, in my opinion, is that trip to Vegas that last week, because they haven't beat them in a long time. And like you said, like Vegas has seemed to respond to Pierce. I know they lost that game 3-0 to Minnesota the other week, but they're probably going to, I mean, the Chargers, they're playing it out kind of. This week will be tough, but I think the Raiders would love to spoil the Broncos' playoff chances.
Yeah, no doubt. We've talked. I think New England will be a challenge. The Chargers are just playing out the string with an interim coach and a backup quarterback. Wouldn't be surprised if that's a rout. But yeah, it's the season finale for the Raiders. We'll have to see how the next two games go. But, they're playing for their coach. They love their coach, Antonio Pierce. A couple of years ago, there was a lot of talk about how they loved Rich Bisaccia, and then Vegas didn't hire him, and Josh McDaniels was a joke. So obviously, if the Raiders play out and the players love their coach, I would think Mark Davis would have to give serious consideration to potentially keeping Antonio Pierce on as coach. And the players, I assume, will want that to happen, and they'll play hard for him.
Well, the Broncos haven't had interesting games in December in a long time, so this is definitely welcome to fans, I'm sure. Like, they haven't been playing meaningful games in December. I can't remember the last time.
And not in January. Certainly,
yeah, and in January too. Yeah,
January 2016.
Yep. So the Broncos will have the Patriots here at home. That game is on Christmas Eve night, 6:15 kick. NFL Network. Chris and I will catch up after Christmas Day. We'll probably catch up on that Tuesday about that game. So make sure to subscribe to this podcast on Apple and on Spotify. And Chris, we will talk to you after the holiday. And happy holidays to you if we don't talk before then.
Yeah, you as well, Chris. Thanks.